I didn't expect this, but at least she had the decency to confess to me and not cheat behind my back until I caught her. I really didn't know what to say. Was I angry? Yes. Was I confused? Yes. Was I going to try to stop her? Not at all. George, I'm not behaving unreasonably. Go see a lawyer if you think it's necessary. The only thing I ask is that you continue to pay for the children's education in college. Besides that, I don't need anything except my clothes and jewelry. I just sat there, holding the divorce papers. I didn't open it, or even look at it. What was the point? Linda had already taken her things out of the house, and I hadn't even noticed. I didn't say anything, but she insisted on babbling incessantly. She did it when she was nervous. She tried her hardest to look calm and composed, but the continuous stream of words pouring out of her mouth gave her away. I stared at the papers and smiled to myself. I think she noticed and started talking faster. Standing up, I tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. Just get out. I got the message. Goodbye. At least she shut up. She stuttered a bit as I went to the kitchen for a cold beer. Instead of finishing what she was about to say, my wife turned and walked out the door for the last time. 10 minutes later, as I finished my second bottle, I glanced at the package she left. According to her words, everything was simple and neat. She also included a power of attorney so I could sell the house. We had just taken out a second mortgage to pay for the college tuition of our two sons, Robert and Glenn. If I sold the house now, I wouldn't even have enough money to pay the realtor's commission. So what was it that ended our 20-year marriage? An old passion. Cameron Wright was her first. Linda and Cameron had been a steady couple for many years before I met her. She often mentioned him in the past, and several of our mutual friends had spoken about him for many years. I ignored it. He was her ex. So what? Now I know it was something more. I must have been sitting for quite a while because I noticed the room was starting to darken. I knocked over 3 empty bottles as I reached out to turn on the desk lamp. Then there was a knock at the door. Damn it. Who else could it be? I was talking to myself. George, I just found out what she did. Billy said I should come and check if everything's okay with you. It was Linda's sister, Grace. I always liked Grace. Actually, I liked her more than Linda. I must have been too drunk and thinking poorly. Billy was my best friend. I should have kicked my own ass just for thinking like that about his wife. I shook my head as if there was water in my ears, in a futile attempt to sort out my logical feelings. Grace took me by the hand and led me to the kitchen. I resisted a little because she seemed to be treating me like an invalid. I didn't need any damn help. My eyes hurt from the fluorescent lighting, but I just squinted. How much beer had I drunk? I had about half a cup of coffee before I realized Grace wasn't saying anything. Feeling better now, George? Can we talk now? Give me a minute. I need to piss. By the time I came back, she had already filled the cup. So, Grace, tell me about my loving wife and Cameron Wright. When did all this happen? Your dumb son-in-law found out about it only today. Don't be too hard on yourself, George. I always thought she still had a thing for that jerk, even after you guys got married. It would have been nice if you said something 20 years ago. Be realistic. I wasn't about to stick my nose into that. I just hoped that over the years she'd forget about him. You two seem to get along so well. Grace, it was never as good as it seemed. Now I realize that most of the time our relationship was more platonic than romantic. I tried and tried over the years, but I never could truly warm her up. Flowers, chocolates, and jewelry never did the trick. We got along, that's it. Actually, we rarely fought. I guess now I understand why. You hid that pretty well. Thanks. Can I grab a few oatmeal cookies from the box behind you? My stomach's asking for something. So, tell me, sister-in-law, what made my wife leave me? I don't know if you remember, but Cameron dropped out of high school and joined the Air Force. Right after that, you started dating Linda. Cameron was Linda's first, if you catch my drift. I nodded and shrugged simultaneously. A girl never forgets her first love. Anyway, she was really mad when he left. She wanted a family and kids. I thought you were the one she chose to help her with that. I thought she made the right choice. I had no idea she was just using you until the jerk came back. Hell, I don't even think she knew he would come back. So why did he come back now? He served 20 years in the Air Force and retired as a major. Linda claims he has a good pension and a few nice managerial positions in the county to start his second career. She told me about it, and there was real pride in her voice. She was admiring his illustrious military career as if she was part of it. Honestly, George, it sounded a bit unhealthy. So, I guess she's living with him now? He's renting an apartment in Berkshire Heights until he can find a suitable house to buy in this area. Linda has completely moved in with him now. How long has he been back? I'm not sure, but I think it's been about 3 weeks. He called her as soon as he got into town. So, this stupid George was a cuckold for so long? Seems that way.
I'm sorry.
Grace tried to refill my coffee cup again, but I waved her off. I don't need any more coffee. All I want now is to take a shower and get a good night's sleep. Thanks for stopping by, Grace. Lock the door on your way out. My sister-in-law actually looked saddened as I left the room. I was glad the boys weren't home anymore. It would have been awkward to explain what happened. They'll find out sooner or later anyway, but I hoped by then I'd have regained some composure and wouldn't look so pathetic. My career choice wasn't as ambitious, but I enjoyed my job. I was in charge of the grocery department at one of the major supermarkets in the area. The company had been trying to promote me to a managerial position for the last 10 years, but I didn't want the long hours and the added responsibility. Now, that didn't matter anymore. Early the next morning, I called my district manager and informed him that I was ready to relocate. That same day, I was assigned to lead a new store about 15 kilometers from home. I spent 3 days training in Baltimore and then started my new job. In my free time, I informed the boys about the family situation, put the house up for sale, and transferred all my credit cards and bank accounts. Linda's car was registered in her name, but the insurance was under my policy. Emphasis on the word was. Launching the new store required a lot of my time. I didn't mind because it kept my mind off my personal problems. Things were pretty organized within the company, so most of the challenges I faced were easily resolved. The corporation invited several professional staffers who had opened stores to stay with us for the first 2 weeks. It was a huge help. They conducted training for most of the new store employees. Half of the staff were experienced and transferred from other stores in the area. I was satisfied with the job and my ability to perform it. In the blink of an eye, everything fell into place. Everything was under control and running smoothly, so I had time to attend to my personal affairs. Since I planned to rent a small apartment near the store, I started getting rid of everything in the house that I no longer needed. Most of it I simply gave away. There were several agencies in the area willing to take practically anything I was willing to part with. Of course, the first thing to go was the marital bed. I felt great satisfaction in getting rid of the wedding and family photos. I actually kept a small collection of photos of the boys. Billy called and insisted that I come over to his place next Sunday for a culinary masterclass. He promised me that Linda wouldn't be there. He also wanted to brief me on Cameron Wright's status, a local war hero. It wasn't much of a culinary masterclass. Billy's 2 teenage daughters showed up but quickly disappeared. Essentially, it was just an opportunity for Billy and me to chat. Grace spent most of the day fetching us cold beers and cleaning up after what Billy cooked. All right, Billy, what do you know about Mr., or rather, Major Wright? All I know, George, is that he holds court at the Foreign Wars Hall. Cameron and Linda have been going there a couple times a week. He's all Tribune and Gladiator. The guys seem to get it, but I think they're just impressed because he's new blood. Damn, most of the guys who show up there are pushing 60. And what does my loving wife do when he loudly declares? Linda usually just stands beside him and smiles. She looks proud to be with him. She never did that when we were together. Damn, George. You're no war hero. Billy couldn't help laughing as he said that, but I didn't find it funny. George. He wears a baseball cap with embroidered major insignias on the front. He even has a tag on the front of his car with that golden oak leaf. He does everything possible to impress everyone that he was a high-ranking officer. Something felt off about Major Wright to me. I finished my beer just as Grace appeared with a couple of fresh bottles. Billy, Cameron didn't even finish high school. How did he become an officer? If I remember correctly, they scrapped that old Mustang program years ago. To become an officer nowadays, you need a degree. How did this son of a bitch get a higher education when he couldn't even get a high school diploma? Good question. I don't have an answer. Did he really join the Veterans Club? Yes. He joined the first week after he returned. Can you get a copy of his membership application? No problem. Why do you ask? I just want to check something. I'll bring it to you next week. Well, around this time, Grace came out and asked us to change the subject so she could join in. I don't remember what we ended up talking about, but a few hours later, I went home with a sly smile on my face. The following week started off normal enough. Paperwork for the divorce proceedings began. I had 3 serious prospects looking at the house, and the realtor was feeling optimistic. Work was smooth sailing until Thursday. When I arrived, Maria Sanchez was waiting for me in my office. Maria Sanchez was the supervisor on my overnight replenishment team from midnight to 8. Maria had been promoted and transferred to the new store across town. All I knew about her was that she was hardworking. Everyone agreed she deserved the promotion and pay raise. If I lost Maria, I'd have a small problem on my hands that I didn't want to deal with. Getting people to work overnight was tough, and finding good ones was nearly impossible. I hope you're not here to complain about something, Mrs. Sanchez. She smiled, but seemed a bit nervous. Actually, I'm not complaining, Mr. Templeton, but I need help. Go ahead. I'll do whatever I can. I have 2 sons, 15 and 16 years old. They both work part-time after school. They need to catch the school bus at 7 a.m., but they struggle to make it. Sometimes, when I come home after 8, they're still in bed. They're not lazy, just tired. I need to get them going in the morning, if you know what I mean. You want a raise so they don't have to work?
No.
Not at all. They work to earn money for school. They both do well in school, but I have to get them there. What do you expect from me? Help. I found it interesting that she wasn't whining. She was a serious woman who led a cohesive team, but she had issues with her own kids. I chuckled a bit at the situation and was met with a sharp response. This isn't funny, Mr. Templeton. If you can't figure out how to help me, I'll just have to find another job. This is amusing, Mrs. Sanchez. You lead a group of people at night who would jump at any chance to bail if they could. They don't do that because they work for you, and you wouldn't put up with it. How did it happen that you let 2 little boys take advantage of you? Where's their father when all this is going on? Now I really angered her. She started to rise with fire in her eyes. For a second, I feared I might have lost her. You're a conceited bastard, Mr. Templeton. Everyone said you were smart and fair. Seems like they were wrong. I didn't come here to be insulted. Settle down and sit. I have a potential solution. She sat back down, but didn't look too pleased about it. I'm going to change your shift. You'll start at 11. That'll give you time to prep inventory for the night crew when they come in at 12. You'll work until 6 when the first of the day shift supervisors arrives. He'll be on duty at the end of your shift. You'll have enough time to get back home, take your boys to school, and maybe even make them breakfast. That's all well and good, except for one little problem. I need at least 38 scheduled hours to keep my medical insurance. I can't afford to lose my insurance. She was right, but I wasn't done yet. Do you go to church, Mrs. Sanchez? Damn it, here you go again. You really know how to push someone's buttons. What the hell does my church-going habit have to do with my job? You're certainly touchy, Mrs. Sanchez. I'd appreciate it if you'd calm down a bit while I finish. And stop calling me Mrs. Sanchez. I'm not married. I suppose you have a clever remark about that too. I was starting to get irritated with this woman. I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and promptly fell backward. For a moment, I just stared at the ceiling. I was struck by how cheap the light fixtures looked. I heard her chuckle as she looked over my desk. I lay there on my back like a little frog, and she quietly laughed at me. She covered her mouth to hide a smile.
Sorry.
I was embarrassed by my clumsiness, and she found it amusing. It was hard for me to compose myself as I got up. If I can't call you Mrs. Sanchez, what should I call you? Maria. Just Maria. Maria. I have 2 supervisors, both Southern Baptists. Neither of them will work Sunday mornings, so ultimately I'll have to find someone. I want you to work from 6 to noon on Sundays. It'll give you extra hours, but it doesn't matter either way. It matters to me. You pay for family medical insurance, right? Yes. For $80 a month, both my boys are covered too. Maria, I'm going to give you a raise. That means your boys will be automatically covered under your insurance. It also means you'll get another small bump in pay. And it also means I won't be eligible for overtime. Is that correct? Yes. For several moments, she said nothing. She was a striking woman. Her hair was dark, but not quite black. However, her eyes were as black as coal. She seemed to have not an ounce of fat on her. In fact, she looked a bit worn out. I tried to figure out what type of figure she concealed under her work clothes when she replied. Okay, I agree, but I know nothing about being a daytime supervisor. I've never had to work with clients. Don't worry about that. I'll work with you for the first 4 shifts. You can't mess everything up. So began my relationship with Maria Sanchez. It was, to say the least, tense, and at that moment I never would have thought it would become serious. I expected her to stay for 6 hours on Sunday morning, but in the end, we worked late into the evening. She insisted on knowing everything she would be responsible for. I had nothing better to do, and I enjoyed her company. There was a small article in the Sunday paper about a fundraiser at the local American Legion branch. Major Cameron Wright was photographed in full uniform next to my loving wife. I can honestly say I've never seen her as proud as in that photo. You'd think she had earned those damn medals herself. I didn't talk to Billy until Monday evening. Grace called me at work and insisted I come over for spaghetti. How could I refuse? Billy had a copy of Cameron's application to join the Veterans Club, as well as a copy of his discharge papers. I told him about the photo in the Sunday newspaper, and he promised to also get me forms from the American Legion's mail. Grace overheard at the beauty salon that Cameron had applied for membership at the Liberty Keys Country Club. Linda and I once tried to join, but we were denied. I didn't care, but Linda was crushed. Grace said Cameron's application seemed to have been largely pre-approved. It was a leisurely week. I had already found a small apartment and usually went straight there after work, drinking at least 3 bottles of beer, sometimes more. Cable TV was included in the rent, so I wasn't entirely bored. Next week, I'll have DSL internet installed. The week ended on a high note when I found an invitation on my desk to dinner with Maria and her 2 sons. I already had her address and phone number, but she gave them to me anyway. I felt awkward, and it could easily be interpreted as a breach of company policy. Just in case, I called my boss in Baltimore and explained. With his blessing, I felt much better about the situation. I bought a bottle of wine to bring along, but I had no idea what to bring for the boys. I was a bit nervous about meeting Maria's sons, but after they learned that I have 2 sons who are already in college, the evening became much more enjoyable. Poor Maria found herself sidelined from most of the conversations. I tried to involve her several times, but eventually she just gave me a grimace, as if to say I shouldn't worry about it. She seemed pleased that I got along with Armin and Martin. The evening ended too quickly, and we never got around to opening the wine. That Sunday, I spent about 2 hours with Maria as she embarked on her first real shift as a supervisor. I had the feeling she couldn't wait to see me off so she could fly solo. That was a good sign to me. She promised to call me if she encountered any problems. I helped her wash the dishes after dinner, and we finally managed to open that bottle of wine. At first, the conversation was awkward. Except for Friday's dinner, everything between Maria and me had been strictly professional. She looked a bit dismayed when I explained to her that our relationship might cause issues, but quickly mentioned that she was sure it was something I could easily resolve. Though I didn't bring it up, Maria must have felt the need to explain her family situation. She lived with her boy's father in Tucson, and one day he just vanished. She stayed there for 3 years, but he never returned. Her brother worked as a mason in the Philadelphia area and convinced her to move in with him and his family. Eventually, she got her own place and has been working ever since to improve her boys' lives. She was never married. As soon as I finished my tale of marital woes, the wine bottle emptied. Despite the dismal topics of conversation, I still enjoyed my time with Maria. We stretched the evening out for a few hours, so the wine consumption wasn't an issue when it was time for me to head home. For the next few days, Everything was fairly normal, both at work and in my personal life. One evening, Billy came over with information from the American Legion Post. We drank a couple of bottles of beer and tried to figure out what to do now that we had all the background. A few too many beers proved to be too much, and Grace eventually came to pick up her drunk husband. I was late to work the next morning, but no one complained since I was the boss, and I usually came in early. Friday morning brought yet another unexpected surprise. 3 vice presidents of the company showed up. They took a cursory walk around the store, but it all seemed a bit phony. Things became much clearer when we broke for lunch. Clearly, there was a severe shortage of managers in the supermarkets. At least it seemed that way to me. Before dinner was even finished, I was offered the position of regional supervisor overseeing 6 stores within a 50-mile radius. The salary and perks associated with this position were more than I could have ever imagined. Of course, I accepted. My deputy at the store was also pleasantly surprised when I handed over all the affairs to him. I left him with one request: don't get involved with Maria. He winked at me, and I smiled, indicating that we were on the same page. Maria, naturally, was unhappy to see me leave the store, but pleased that I got promoted. I invited her to a nice dinner, which I guess could be considered our first real date. The boys were thrilled that we spent the evening together. It was also the first time I saw her dressed up and put together. She was stunning. She seemed to take my promotion a little better when I told her I would still be working and living nearby. On the other hand, she was dismayed to hear that I had to go to Baltimore for 2 weeks of training. On Sunday, I had lunch with Billy and Grace. We celebrated my success, and I tried my best not to drink. That evening, I planned a short trip to Maryland to be fresh for my first day of training. Billy wanted to know what I planned to do about Cameron and Linda. I told him that would have to wait until I finished and settled into my new position. Maria and I talked on the phone every day, sometimes twice. I felt like a teenager. She asked me about all the workouts, and I made her tell me what was happening at the store. I always asked her about the boys. She seemed to appreciate the fact that I showed interest in them. At my new job, there were many responsibilities I didn't expect. Involvement in the community was crucial. I was expected to join as many civic and social organizations as possible, including the local country club. I smiled when I was told that my position in the company ensured recognition practically everywhere I went. Life was good. During the first weekend, I went home and saw Maria twice. I got my first kiss, but I felt a little awkward because technically I was still married. She hesitantly asked me about the kiss and chuckled a bit at my explanation. She teased me a bit, and I think she enjoyed it. I know I did. The company rented a small office in one of the local business complexes and fully furnished it, including a secretary. They had done this before, and it showed. I was ready to dive into full-time work on the very first day. On my desk, among other things, was my application for full membership at the Liberty Keys Country Club. All I had to do was sign it and pick up my membership card. I decided that would be my first order of business. I was in a new suit, sitting behind the wheel of my new company car. Everything was great. I confidently walked into the club's foyer until I saw Linda. She was standing with a few other ladies, dressed in a cute little tennis outfit. I didn't even know she played tennis. Suddenly, the pain and humiliation of what she had done to me came rushing back. I lost my composure and confidence just seeing her. Unnoticed, I tried to walk past the group. Everything was going fine until I heard one of the ladies ask, "Wasn't that your husband who just walked in?" I didn't turn around. There was a quiet murmur as I handed my application to the attendant. He disappeared into the back room while I stood there, waiting for something unpleasant to happen. I knew it would. It would have been nice to have a witty retort ready, but my mind was blank. "George, what are you doing here? This is for members only, you know? You're not planning to try to join again, are you?" I really wanted to embarrass her in front of her new friends, but I couldn't bring myself to do it.
Linda.
"You look nice. Lovely outfit. Is it new? I didn't know you played tennis." I was mumbling something. I wanted to be clever and witty, but it just wasn't happening. A string of foolish remarks was a good indicator of how nervous I was. That alone was awkward. "I'm taking lessons, George. I always wanted to play tennis, but we could never afford it." All I could do was smile. You really shouldn't be here, George. I'm really embarrassed. It's members only, you know? I was still smiling when the attendant returned to the counter. Here you go, Mr. Templeton. Your membership card, locker key, and a copy of the club rules. Welcome to Liberty Keys Country Club, sir. I nodded silently to him in a gesture of thanks and turned to leave. Linda stood there with a puzzled expression on her face. I grinned and said nothing more as I made my way back through the club's foyer. Stepping out the door, I wanted to glance back to see what she was doing, but I resisted the urge. I smiled all the way back to the office. That evening, I invited Maria to dinner at Red Lobster. I had no intention of gloating, but I derived immense pleasure from telling her about my encounter with Linda earlier. There was no wine with dinner because my guest had to be at work by 11. We chuckled a bit about the situation. Maria promised to join me at the club for a late lunch on Sunday after her shift ends. I caught myself hoping that we would run into Cameron and Linda. The rest of the week went smoothly until Friday. Helen, my new secretary who by now knew about my family issues, smiled as I entered the office. A local newspaper lay on my desk, and on the front page was a photo of Cameron Wright in handcuffs being put into a plain black car. Cameron was unaware that the heads of the American Legion were vetting their candidates to ensure unworthy veterans didn't slip through. He did indeed resign from the Air Force, but as a technical sergeant, not a major. The fact that he wore medals he was never awarded was bound to bring him even more sorrow. They called it stolen valor, and they didn't take it lightly. I had a strange feeling that Cameron Wright would quickly lose face in his hometown. Helen brought me a cup of coffee and said that smiling is normal. It brought a smile to her face. About an hour later, the realtor called me and informed me that the house was sold. The closing was scheduled for 2 weeks from then. Just when I thought things couldn't get any better, my final divorce papers arrived in the mail. Good old Cameron pulled some strings with some of his new friends and processed the paperwork faster than usual. I didn't think they were still friends. The day and the week were coming to an end. Billy dropped by to see my new office, but really, he wanted to tell me that Linda had moved in with him and Grace. He wasn't home yet, so the only information he had was what he received over the phone when Grace called him. He wasn't thrilled about his new house guest, but he was thrilled about what had happened. Billy didn't put up any resistance when I took him to the local bar on the corner to celebrate. My treat? I called Maria at home before she left for work and gave her the good news. I think she was in as high spirits as I was. Billy came and dragged me out of bed on Saturday. He had better self-control than I did. We went to a cafe for a buffet breakfast and much-needed coffee. While we ate, I caught up on the latest news about my ex-wife. Her car had been returned to the dealership. It seemed Cameron was more than willing to pay for Linda, but the checks didn't amount to anything. She didn't even know about it until they came and took her car back. Apparently, he took care of everything else in the same manner. I don't know how long he thought he could get away with it, but he certainly had fooled many people before he got caught. Grace told Linda she could stay for a week, and only a week. Linda had no idea where she was going or what she was going to do. The little money she had when she left me seemed to have vanished too. Maria was still fast asleep by this time, but Armin and Martin were eager and ready to try their luck on the Liberty Keys golf course. Maria was up and about when we returned home, and she gave us a good lecture about not having fun without her. We ordered pizza and rented a movie. Yes, life was good. On Sunday morning, Maria and I enjoyed a pleasant late breakfast at the local club. I had hoped to show her off to Linda and Cameron, but they never showed up. There were a few glances in our direction, and I noticed a couple of comments, but overall, everything was fine. It was the first of many upcoming brunches. Linda moved out of Billy and Grace's house by the end of the week into a small furnished apartment. Grace and Linda kept in touch, but they weren't as close as they used to be, though still sisters. Robert and Glenn came home for our wedding 3 months later. They teased me good-naturedly about having to go out and find 2 new guys to replace them. The 4 guys hit it off, which made Maria and me happy. Robert and Glenn never mentioned Linda. I didn't intentionally avoid talking about her, but it seemed the topic just never came up. I don't know if they visited her before heading back to school or not. Billy was my best man, but he was more of a witness than anything else since it was just a civil ceremony. Maria stopped working before the wedding. I insisted that Armin and Martin quit too, so they could focus on their studies. None of them complained. Although I didn't make any money from selling the old house, I still managed to buy a new one without any problems. 2 months after the wedding, Maria and I were out Christmas shopping at the store when we saw Linda. She was working at the customer service desk in the front of the store, dressed in a uniform, khaki pants, and a red shirt. She seemed to have lost weight. She looked up and noticed Maria and me looking her way. We watched as she turned and walked into the office behind the desk. It wasn't our intention to put her in an awkward position. She had been through enough already. Maria and I left the store and have been shopping elsewhere since. Cameron Wright simply disappeared. After he was arrested and charged, he was just taken away, and we haven't heard anything more about him. Robert and Glenn came home for Christmas to the new house. The big holiday surprise was Linda's arrival. Maria invited her without telling me. There was a moment of awkwardness. At first, I was annoyed, but then I realized it was a very noble and brave move on Maria's part. The confrontation was necessary for all of us to come to a resolution. I still haven't forgiven Linda for what she did, but just the realization that she understood what she lost made the situation better.
Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. And we'll see you on the Cheating Secrets channel.